Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Bahout. I'm the director of the university's Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs. And I'm very glad and honored to welcome you all. Thank you for being here to discuss a very important and very critical topic in general, but now in particular also given the situation or the context within which Lebanon is going through. Very quickly, I won't take long, but for any country in the world, one of the most difficult questions, and diplomats are here, probably will not contradict me, is how to define a foreign policy for a country. The usual answer is a foreign policy should answer or should follow the national interests of this country, which leads us to another question that for us students of political science, we have struggled very long with, which is how to define the national interest. Who defines the national interest? Is the national interest something intangible over time? Is it fixed? Can we talk about a doctrine of foreign policy that is regardless of what changes in the world and the region, etc., etc.? Now, this question is even more complicated and much more complex in the Lebanese situation, because we will be frank here, we are living in a divided society, in a society where the political culture polarization is strong, where positions are sometimes very antagonistic, and this has often led Lebanon throughout the history to be paralyzed in terms of political decision, and even more so in terms of foreign policy posturing. This is exactly what has, in a way, surrounded our reflection in this paper that we are going to discuss today. A paper that we are very, very honored and glad to count as an author of His Excellency Minister Nassif Hitti, who's a fellow today at IFI. Modestly, I've contributed a little bit to that paper, and our fellow our coordinator for the International and Regional Affairs Cluster, my colleague and friend Yeghia Tashjian as well. A small note on the history or the process of this work, of this paper. Actually, we've started maybe some 3 years ago with a small group of former diplomats, of retired Lebanese diplomats, reflecting on what could be realistically a foreign policy for Lebanon. It has taken some sessions, some discussions, and then the war came. The Gaza war, then the Lebanon war came. We halted this process, and after the war, I found it as the director of this institute that it was very urgent to put out a paper talking about that. In light of the lessons learned from the war, in light of the urgency also for us in Lebanon to start thinking about this issue, and have a toolkit for not only a foreign policy and a foreign policy doctrine, but also a toolkit for diplomatic action. And these two issues, are not the same. You can have a foreign policy, or you can have a foreign policy outlook, but you don't have the diplomatic apparatus that will implement this doctrine or this vision. A diplomatic apparatus means a set of laws, a set of structures, a set of men and women that will implement that with a skill set, with certain talents, with certain instructions. So we acted also, or we wanted to have this as a policy-oriented paper in order for the Lebanese diplomacy to probably, we hope so, translate this into recrafting its own apparatus. Without further ado, we are very lucky tonight to discuss not only the paper, of course, but this issue in general with a very seasoned diplomat and a good friend and a fellow of IFI, Minister Nassif Hitti. Very quickly, Nassif has been, of course, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs for Lebanon. I wouldn't say a presidential hopeful or contender, but for a very long time, Minister Hitti was Ambassador Hitti. He was the ambassador of the Arab League in Europe, in France, in the Vatican, and elsewhere. He has also worked in New York, and he has had very prominent positions within the apparatus of the Arab League, and we are very happy to count on his talent, his wisdom, and his skills as a senior advisor for our work here at the Institute. We'll be discussing with Minister Hitti Ambassador Caroline Ziadeh, who's joining us from abroad, from afar. Good afternoon, Ambassador Ziadeh. And we are also very lucky to have her because Caroline Ziadeh has held also important diplomatic positions in the name of Lebanon, mainly in international organizations in New York. She also worked with the UN organization as a special envoy, and today Lebanon is lucky to count her as its representative in Geneva at the international organizations there. And Caroline will shed a light from probably a very concrete practitioner perspective, because she knows the diplomatic apparatus of Lebanon from close, as you do also, Minister Hitti, of course. The paper will be presented very quickly by our friend and fellow and coordinator Yeghia Tashjian. I call you to the podium, not more than 8 to 10 minutes, presenting the main lines, the main points of the paper, and then we'll get into a discussion on the topic more than the paper. Thank you for being here, and I hope that this will be a profitable debate.
Thank you, Joseph. Dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, it is an honor to speak today about a subject that lies at the heart of our national survival, Lebanon's foreign policy. For too long, our diplomacy has reflected the turbulence of our politics rather than the strength of our national vision. Yet today, as the world and our region undergo profound transformation, Lebanon must rediscover its voice, its balance, and its strategic purpose. Out of this necessity, our institute published a policy brief titled Lebanon's Foreign Policy Challenges and Recommendations, aiming to redefine our country's foreign policy in a changing environment. The objective of this policy paper is to first identify whether Lebanon had foreign policy doctrines over time. Second, assess how domestic divisions and polarization have led to a foreign policy paralysis. Third, to highlight the importance of adopting a positive neutrality and a proactive diplomacy for a country to navigate long regional conflicts. And finally, to provide recommendations on reforming diplomatic apparatus and put Lebanon back on the regional and international diplomatic map. Throughout our history, this small country has played an outsized role as a meeting point of civilizations, cultures, and transnational ideas. Our foreign policy has been shaped by our openness, diversity, and our geography, whether we perceive it as a curse or a blessing. Traditionally, Lebanon sought to balance East and West to maintain Arab solidarity while keeping strong international friendships. The 1943 National Pact emphasized neutrality and non-alignment, a principle that in theory should have helped Lebanon to remain a forum for dialogue rather than a battlefield for confrontation. Yet, history also reminds us that internal divisions have often weakened our diplomacy. When foreign policy becomes an extension of domestic rivalries, Lebanon loses its most valuable asset, its credibility. As reflected in our study, throughout the last decades, Lebanon has adopted multiple foreign policy doctrines. Some have failed, and others partially were successful. One of the main reasons of this failure was the demarcation line between domestic and foreign policies that has been blurred in Lebanon. This overlap exacerbated the situation, making the country vulnerable to external pressures and interventions, while allowing regional and international actors to decide on matters at the cost of Lebanon's sovereignty and its national interest. Springing from the idea of classical realism that the objective of the state is to survive, to address this issue, we argued that Lebanon needs to adopt a state-centric foreign policy based on two important pillars: positive neutrality and proactive diplomacy. To achieve this, it's imperative for the country to build an internal consensus around the proposition of these principles amid local sectarian and political polarization. Here we ask ourselves, is self-neutrality a realistic choice? Lebanon's self-neutrality towards the Arab-Israeli conflict is problematic as it suffers from two basic shortcomings. First, a strong consensus at home is needed to launch such a policy. But throughout history, this has proved impossible and sometimes catastrophic. Second, let us assume that Lebanon has adopted self-neutrality. If this unilateral declaration does not constitute a status of permanent neutrality in international law, and accompanied, of course, by regional and international agreement and some form of acknowledgement, it would not be materialized due to strategic choices of regional actors and the local actors affiliated with regional patrons. Therefore, Lebanon cannot adopt the status of legal neutrality, at least not for the time being, to be realistic. But at the same time, if it is Lebanon's right not to make a peace alone, then so it is Lebanon's right not to make a war alone. By positive neutrality, that is political neutrality, we mean taking a cooperative stance towards neighboring countries while avoiding involvement in any conflict between them. In this sense, neutrality is not exercised towards the state with which one lacks diplomatic engagement, but towards neighboring or friendly countries with which Lebanon has diplomatic relations. Therefore, Lebanon should support and seek a united Arab front through diplomatic means without engaging in risky military adventures that could jeopardize its already fragile statehood. But how could this happen? This is why we argue that positive neutrality should go hand in hand with proactive diplomacy based on the weather bell or the fire detector approach. Engaging in proactive diplomacy means that the country needs to engage in preemptive foreign policy making instead of taking a reactive approach to surrounding conflicts. However, such efforts also needs to be institutionalized. This is why Lebanon needs to reform its diplomatic apparatus by engaging in structural and institutional reforms to prepare the diplomatic cadre to properly address contemporary regional and international challenges proactively. First, there needs to be public diplomacy in order to foster Lebanon's national interest and objectives at the global level. Second, Lebanon needs to deploy its soft power and engage in lobbyism. Third, further institutionalize the diaspora-motherland relations. Fourth, to establish a diplomatic academy aiming to train skilled diplomats. And finally, fifth, to prepare future mediators to address rising regional and global tensions. Dear Excellencies and guests, foreign policy is not merely about states and borders and political theories. It's about vision and survival. Lebanon may be small, sometimes also complicated, but its history proves that small states can have a great diplomacy when guided by clear principles. To reflect on these ideas and recommendations, I would hand back to Dr. Bahout to moderate this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yeghia. Is the sound okay? Is the sound okay? Okay. Dr. Hitti, of course, you are the main co-author of this paper that Yeghia has just presented. But I would like to give you the floor first, and first of all, to add certain things, but also to put this in a more general context and give us your own, not only vision, but experience also of what diplomacy is in general and Lebanon's foreign policy in particular.
Thank you, Professor Bahout. Thank you, dear Joe, for inviting me to share with you my views. Well, I had the chance to participate in the making of this paper, as well as also participating in conferences before that. Thanks to you, we organize about foreign policy and different aspects that condition the making of foreign policy. There's often a confusion between diplomacy and foreign policy, and sometimes some people do criticize diplomats, and I keep saying for not conducting a certain foreign policy. I keep saying diplomacy without foreign policy is like music without instruments. If you don't have a concept, what's your doctrine of foreign policy? What you're going to sell? It's not a matter of public relations. What is the idea that you're going to sell? What are the priorities that must be set? So that's a very important point that we need, and we participated. We had many roundtable discussions about that matter. I'll just say a few words in the beginning, if you allow me. Just we learned the first year of political science actually next door here in Jessup Hall during golden days, my golden days at AUB. That on fait la politique de sa géographie. It was said to us in French, even here, that you have to take into consideration your geography. I mean, you don't exist in a vacuum. And that's one thing that we must take into consideration. And from day one, within the same first remark. I remember I published something after in '89 called the Foreign Policies of Lebanon to suggest that each political community, religious political community, has its own concept of foreign policy. So in practical terms, it's a federation, it's a confederation, because federation, you act within the same state. Some countries consider that we must be the Hanoi of any revolution, okay, for others and for ourselves, and others, we're Switzerland, we have nothing to do with these people around us. We are an Arab country, we're proud of that, but doesn't mean that we have to carry the weight for everybody. We have to carry weight that we do carry, and I've said it, I was in my official position, Arabic ambassador, many times about that matter. So we have to normalize, second comment, other than doing the politics of its geography, to normalize the relationship. How do we look and situate ourselves? And for the first example, I always give the example of the famous April, if I have good memory, 59 tent meeting of Abdel Nasser and Fuad Shahab. And the tent was built during the creation of the, Al-Wahda al-Masriya Suriya on the borders. And President Shahab asked Nasser to say, I wanted to meet with you because today you're the president of Syria. And I have to have working and good relations. Well, I'm giving this example to suggest that you cannot be blind to your geography. And not being blind to your geography doesn't mean confronting the others or submitting yourself to the willingness of the other. That's the first thing that we must take into consideration. Some very few points, Joe, I will mention en passant. We have to develop a national consensus, a working national consensus, one of how, a modus operandi, what to do. Not only talking about principles, that's a very important matter. Third matter, to develop practical rules, how to conduct this and that, what to do with this and that, very briefly. Fourth point, which I stop at, about positive neutrality. And first time myself, I spoke about it in 2009, I remember, in London, in a conference organized for the Center for Lebanese Studies of Oxford. The importance of positive neutrality, it's not neutrality between friends or countries with which you have good relations, normal relations, and countries in which you are not in no relations. Israel is not included in that matter, technically in a state of war. It's with countries with which, and this is not we created it was created before that, with which you have normal relations. And when we say normal relations, it means there are problems as there are good relations. If there are no problems, all diplomats will be on the unemployment list, as we know. Basically, there should be some problem somewhere. So that's a very basic matter about positive neutrality. And I always would give a good example, the country, an Arab country of Oman. A proactive policy is another point I talk about. A proactive foreign policy. You know, a firefighter. It's in your interest when you do that, when you try to build bridges, when you be a facilitator, that your good health, meaning your stability and your development, becomes the interest of all countries around you. Your health is in the interest of everybody. You have to act also, one more reason, to develop what I consider a neo-Westphalian system, if you can do. One of the specificities of the Middle East order, it's a disordered order. We have the tendency to speak over the heads of states. Transnational identities, expressed differently, are stronger in shaping politics than international relations, interstate relations. And that we have to address. You're free to adopt any ideology you want to adopt, but not to become a policy. You don't extend or withdraw recognition, legitimate recognition of a government because it doesn't play this way or it plays that way. We need to develop a normal order. That's a very important matter. Last but not least, as I said, to go back to diplomacy, official diplomacy is very important. I are here very distinguished friends, good diplomats. But I developed a sort of fixation on the importance of developing public diplomacy, which open doors for official diplomacy, which confirms certain decisions taken by official diplomacy, which act in parallel way, whether it's economic diplomacy, cultural diplomacy, all forms of diplomacy. We live in a global village today. And contact must not be only reserved for that, for officials. You facilitate, I could speak from my 35 years experience, how much it's important public diplomacy. You take off sometimes what you call 1.5 track to open doors. We used to do it in Madrid, Mr. Ambassador, my good friend here, to open the doors to develop later. So these are some ideas that we need to do in Lebanon. If we cannot develop that matter, it's in the interest of Lebanon to adopt a policy of positive neutrality. We're again an Arab country. We can't be in the arms of one country against another Arab country or regional country. Of course, meaning Iran, Turkey, or other external forces. We need to adopt that. Doesn't mean if A attacks B that we don't adopt a position. No. But you try always to build bridges, because this provides you with all kinds of security that you need to be provided with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Hitti. In a subsequent round of questions, I will probably unpack certain points that you have mentioned, at least 3 or 4, regarding the notion of neutrality and also the notion of mediation, etc., etc. But before that, I would turn to you, Ambassador Ziadeh, with probably a two levels question. First of all, as a long-time practitioner of what Lebanon's diplomacy is, how does this resonate to you? I mean, does it make sense? Is it something completely theoretical, irrealistic, etc.? What are your critiques of that? And second, you have worked for a long time within the UN system, and today you are in Geneva with international organizations also. So where you are and have you been, and where you have been, is a very good cenacle where you can hear the echoes of what we are discussing. How is the international community, as you know it, you practice it, as you see it every day, receive or perceive Lebanon's foreign policy and these sets of recommendations?
Thank you, and good afternoon from Geneva. Dr. Bahout, thank you for organizing this very timely discussion, and it's always an honor and a privilege, and it's really a humbling exercise for me to speak in the presence of my former boss, Dr. Hitti. Thank you for the opportunity. My apologies, your last questions was not clear because I had technical issues. So let me kindly ask you before embarking with my questions, with my answers, if you don't mind repeating your second question.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Do you hear me now?
Hello?
Do you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
I hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Caroline?
Good afternoon from Geneva. Can you hear me?
She heard me.
Go ahead with the first question that you've heard.
Okay. So again, good afternoon, and I will try to address your first question as a practitioner. I would like to greet my colleagues in the room, and I would have liked to be with you in person. Unfortunately, my duty called me to reach my post in Geneva. So we read very carefully the paper prepared, and I listened very carefully to your comments, and allow me as a practitioner to go back to the important notion that you tried to address at the beginning, which is the national interest. Because there is no diplomacy and there is no foreign policy, there are no national priorities without a national interest. So we in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we look at the national interest as anchored in the constitutions. That's first. Secondly, the common denominator reflected in the ministerial declarations, based on which the government obtained the vote of confidence in the parliament. And this is very simple. If you look at the latest ministerial declaration, there is a clear indication by the minister in it, reflecting the priorities set by the president, that Lebanon will not be used as a platform to launch attacks against any friendly or Arab countries. So this is our guiding principles. This is our national interest. This is how we try to translate it in our work in daily basis in different missions and embassies abroad. And if I may draw your attention to several proactive initiatives by Lebanese diplomacy in the framework of the specificity of a complex society like Lebanon in a very shifting and evolving geopolitical context. Let me take you back to Lebanon Security Council membership in 2010-2011. That was the beginning of the disassociation policy with all the reaction in Lebanon regarding from one side to the other side. But that was the premise of kind of neutrality, first. Secondly, it is anchored in the traditional principles of non-alignment of the Lebanese foreign policy. And allow me to elaborate a little bit. What are the principles of non-alignment? Very simple. First, support and work to respect and to protect the sovereignty of the state. Meaning, controlling your border, strengthening your institutions in general, and the Lebanese armed forces capacities in particular. The second one is non-interference. We cannot allow anybody to interfere in our businesses, and we're not supposed to interfere in other businesses. So this disassociation policy, anchored in the principles in non-alignment, accompanied Lebanese foreign policy and Lebanese policies in several ministerial declarations. And it has been translated in voting, in the General Assembly, in the Human Rights Council, in the Arab League, and in the UNESCO. So that was a proactive decision by the diplomacy at that point in time. Because in the paper as well, we're not firefighters. We are early warning system, diplomats. Going back to the point raised by Minister Hitti, public diplomacy. Diplomats are not supposed to sit in their offices. Diplomats are supposed to establish networks, and networks will be beyond their interlocutors in the diplomatic sphere. They are supposed to reach out to NGOs, to multiple stakeholders, and to academia. And that's why we did not hesitate when we received this invitation to echo and to clearly state what do we do as practitioners. Nevertheless, the diplomacy in Lebanon has always faced adversity, but our resilience is there. Now, going back to the second question on the, and if I may just read it because I just received it. So Lebanon's foreign policy. Lebanon and the perceptions of Lebanon's foreign policy. If I may, I have 30 years of experience in international organization. You can see the perception and the belief of Lebanon's role in the eyes of our interlocutors. You see the sparkles whenever they see us. They come to see us, to work with us, to bridge the gap and to build bridges between groups. This is what we do. And maybe, Professor Hitti, it is linked to our geography. And maybe, and most importantly, it is embedded in our DNA as Lebanese. We are trained diplomats to bring people together, to mediate, because that's what we do in complex societies like Lebanon. We mediate. We dialogue on daily basis, be it in our families, in our societies, and our ministries, and we try to find the common denominator. So based on this, and I'm not pretending that we're not facing challenges, on the contrary, but I will keep my challenges to the second round of conversations. We need to have clear doctrine with clear guidance from the political institutions to allow us to translate our foreign policy into actions through public diplomacy, through outreach, and maybe, Minister Hitti, it will require a little bit more than a spokesperson. may be a communication strategy in peacetime and in crisis times. And if I may, I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Ziadeh. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Now, can you hear me?
I cannot hear you, sorry.
Okay. Let us stick now to the conversation. Sorry for that, for a while at least, with Minister Hitti. Nassif, if you allow me to call you Nassif. Some of the points here I would like to develop a little bit. I will leave the question of geography for a moment aside because it's a very important one. But when we talk about this sort of, let's say, understanding on a sort of neutrality and putting our internal problems aside, dealing with our neighbors or with the outside world, you gave some examples. The 58, for example, the 59 example, the tent between Fuad Shahab and Gamal Abdel Nasser. More recently, for example, the decision by, I think, the Mikati government with the beginning of the war in Syria about Na'ib al-Nafs, the distanciation, or the Abda declaration, or etc. All these examples are very interesting in how we can produce a sort of posture. The problem is that historically and every time, this doesn't last. It doesn't last for two things. First of all, because the regional environment is very volatile and extremely hectic, and so we have to follow and adapt. And second, because usually, this is the empirical experience, the Lebanese internal division, domestic divisions, are stronger than the position that has been agreed upon by the same political forces that will, a bit later on, disregard it and betray it. So how do you square this sort of conundrum, of dilemma, and how can you build a position that can last at least, for example, now we are taking certain positions, okay? They are here to stay because of the balance of power. But once the balance of power changes, these positions will be obsolete or caduc. So how do you square?
Yes, Joe, the balance of power will be always changes. It's a very dynamic situation around us. We cannot deny developments, whether we like them or dislike them on one hand, but also we have to have some basic elements. Diplomacy is very important. Ambassador Ziadeh mentioned it, and she's a very good example in what she's doing, and some other colleagues are doing. But to have a stronger impetus for their action, you have to be able to adopt certain decisions and to move beyond that matter. We are always on the reactive side of events in the region. We need to be on the proactive. And here again is the challenge. How could you develop minimal working consensus, not slogans? We have an inflation of slogans, how much we love each other, and it's not a matter of dabki and kes ara. It's not that matter. To develop really common interest, to identify common, what are our priorities in foreign policy in order to react to that priorities and give instructions to our diplomacy to move on forward. Particularly, we have excellent potential abroad. Just think of the Lebanese network of Lebanese all over the world. This is extremely important in lobbying. This is very important in creating, I don't want to use pressure, but in changing perception of people. I could give you stories and stories about that matter. So, but the potential is enormous. But how to activate that potential? To go back, what's your concept of foreign policy? We need to have a minimal agreement on what to do about that matter. For instance, in the conflict currently opposing us to Israel that has been going on for years, our position must be always, and we're trying to push in that direction, we need to go and make Israel respect the 1949 armistice agreement that manages the relationship until there is peace one day and the conditions of peace. We say it. The president mentioned it recently. Why I'm giving examples. The prime minister mentioned it recently. Comprehensive peace as it has been adopted in the Arab League Summit meeting in 2002 in Beirut. That would constitute strong points to develop and translate later on into public policy and into official policy. But we need to go beyond just empty slogans sometimes to suggest on that matter. We are hostage to our milieu, like any country is hostage to its milieu. Developments in the region would allow us today to move a bit forward on that matter.
Okay, Caroline, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question that, about the points that Minister Hitti has put, I would like to address you the question about this last point on public diplomacy, or sometimes other types of diplomacies, not only public diplomacy, but cultural diplomacy, economic diplomacy, track 2 diplomacy, mediation diplomacy, the use of the diaspora and Lebanon's expatriates, and etc. According to your experience, is Lebanon, first of all, tooled for that? And has it already used this at some junctures during your experience?
Thank you. Actually, I wanted to share with you and with Dr. Hitti, because during his tenure as minister, we spoke so many times about the white paper, the guidance, the resources, the training. So allow me to share with you the culmination of so many discussions. So the challenges are 4 R's. The first one is restoring the role of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as center hub for public diplomacy. And when we're talking about public diplomacy, it's not only foreign policy. It is cultural, it is digital, it is climate. We need to be part of the international conversations. So the first challenge is to restore the role of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I trust my colleagues present in the room would agree with me. We're not talking about monopoly of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We're talking about the coordination of the national interest once it is translated in the ministerial declaration to have one message and one communication. Let me give you an example. When we spoke about cultural diplomacy, or we speak about climate change, we need to rely on the expertise of the Ministry of Culture as well as on the Ministry of Environment to align the messages, the key messages. Then we take these messages to our interlocutors abroad. And there should be a close circle of communication. We're not independent entities. Remember, if our starting point is national interest, we need to work around the national interest. And if you look at the structure, and I agree, the structure of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will require some amendment because the decree organizing the ministry dates back to 1970. And I am confident that the new team in charge of the ministry currently set a priority to look at the reinvigoration of the legal framework. But the current structure of the ministry is taking into consideration the cultural affairs, the economic affairs, the diaspora affairs. Do we have the resources? And this is my second R of the challenges. When we speak about the resources, we have 2 layers of challenges. The human resources, and here I can echo Minister Hitti's need for a diplomatic academy for training and for aligning and upskilling and preparing diplomats. And I totally agree with you on this. But meanwhile, not because of the absence of the diplomatic academy, and I still remember our joint effort, Minister, in securing trainings through bilateral channels and through UNITARs and international organizations. And remember, the diplomats are not simply joining the ministry. They go through a process of selection. So they have the required standards to join the ministry and to build up on it. So the resources are keys. The second kind of resources to enable the human resources to fulfill their mandates in an optimal manner is financial resources. Because when we need to do appropriate outreach and soft power is a strong tool, but it is an expensive one, especially in this competitive environment. Going back to the diaspora, and maybe this discussion is very timely. Let's go back to the diaspora participation in the election last round and the round before. So it was the ministry who coordinated all these efforts. And there were successes and there were areas for improvement. And that's why it's very important to pause for a second to assess what worked, identify what did not work, and to plan and prepare. And planning is very, very, very important. So the third R, if I may, is the messages and reporting. And here, if I may go back to the spokesperson, what kind of messages we're going to convey to our diaspora abroad? Because Dr. Bahout, you mentioned that Lebanon and the societal differences in Lebanon and the complexities of political composition in Lebanon. I trust you are very seasoned academic, and Mr. Minister knows better than any of us. It's the same at the level of the diaspora. That's why it's very important to identify the national interest, common messages, and to convey them to the diaspora, to unleash the potential of the diaspora. This is how we can build a public policy / lobbying through the tiers of our wealth of communities abroad. And the 4R, if I may, is the region. We're not an island, and even islands are impacted by their geography. We need to be able to reinvigorate our role in a region which is troubled by, and I heard you properly, Minister Hitti, you talk about the Arab Peace Initiative in 2002. It is a region troubled by the Arab-Israeli conflict. We need to be in line and in tune with all the trends going on in the region. And why? Because it's not only political. You know, we have areas. Remember, we have the issues of oil exploration and exploitation. We have green energy, and we have alternative energy, and we have digitalization. This morning, we were attending the meeting of UNCTAD, and this is the 16th conference. Many ministers. Trade is key. When you have prosperity, it's the only way for stability. So these are the challenges that we are facing as diplomats, as practitioners, with the aim, goal, and objective is to, which will lead me to my 5th 5, which is revive and revitalize Lebanon's relevance and credibility. And I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hitti. Minister, he would like to...
Just in line with what Ambassador Ziadeh has said, I fully agree with her, of course. We have a huge potential in terms of diaspora, in terms of specialization and geographic distribution. We need to go beyond seasonal attention paid to them, event attention paid to them. We need to create networks and institutionalized networks. I suggested in the past, but of course, we were during the Corona time. It was difficult to do that. You remember, Ambassador, to have two kinds of organization, geographic ones, let's say European, Africa, whatever is different region, and also specialization, medical doctor, business people in different fields, but to create a certain form of institutionalization, to create permanency, so have to permanent relationship. Diasporas are extremely important in providing support, I don't mean in terms of direct financial support, and providing more than that, comprehensive support to the country, and more important, in being bridge builder between the societies where they are, where they acquired nationality, where most of them were born, large part of my family are Brazilians, I know what I'm talking about, and on the other hand, Al-Watan al-Umm, Lebanon itself. So it's not a matter of reacting to an event, it's a matter of having strategic, comprehensive, structured, and institutionalized planning.
Okay, thank you. I would like to move to one of your first points that you raised, and I think this is probably the most puzzling or the most interesting challenge for Lebanon's foreign policy and diplomacy, the role of mediation or firefighters or, let's say, negotiator, etc. You mentioned the example of Oman. Okay, this is often, it comes to our mind. However, today, if you look at the Arab map, at least, if you stick to the Arab region, you have many candidates to play that role. Oman is still one, of course. You have Qatar recently, who has tried and probably succeeded on a lot of issues. You have Iraq that is now becoming a candidate to play that role, or at least it has played it on at least one or two issues. Egypt in the time, in other times, and even Algeria in the times of Boumediene also was a mediator. I mean, the famous Algiers Accord between Iraq and Iran in the 70s are still well known. What is the most, let's say, the more resemblant example that Lebanon can be attracted to, and what are the requirements for that and the constraints for that?
Well, you mentioned two categories. On certain issues, we remember the Algerian case. It's normal now if you have very good relations with the two countries, but you can't have the same specific relationship with two countries all the time using all kinds of differences. There is a second one which does not really negate the first one, is to be considered as having a balanced policy and as an active policy, that you are involved in each and every issue. Because if you want to mediate, it's not a matter of having Mother Teresa. I'm sorry, I mean, you have good attention. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to know what's under the table. You have to know not what the diplomat has told you as a statement, what's behind that statement. So that's knowledge. Second important matter is the perception of the parties that you have a balanced role and you have a commitment. This is why Oman in the past, I remember, we spoke about Oman in particular on many issues, and today is Qatar. I'm not excluding other countries, but these countries are playing a role because of the perception of the countries. Your quality, the diversity in Lebanon, your history of rich relations, but not very proactive on that matter, could provide you with that role if it's known that you are really able and capable, and more important than that, that's the first condition, willing to play such a role, to play such a mediation role among different countries, to be a firefighter. Because at the end of the day, it's in your own interest. And more important than that, I always go back to Oman because I remember I was doing the beginning of my diplomatic career in the early 80s. At the height of the Iraq-Iran war, at the height of the Iraq war, and when Egypt was suspended from the Arab League, Oman was the country that will go to the Arab League, member of the Arab League, talk to the Egyptian, come back to the Arab League. I could give you 10 hours of examples. The same about Iraq and Iran. The same about Iraq. So the perception, what does this give you? It gives you a sort of strong support, a strong security guarantees that you're a need for everybody, that you only bridge, or the most important bridge, or the most effective bridge that's there. And that role, Lebanon can play. It has the potential. How to activate it, how to turn it into... Ambassador, my good friend, spoke about the role of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but we have to inject more potential in the state also, and in the conception of the role of Lebanon, that will be carried on by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's what we need. I believe that we can do it, but we have to do our lessons, as we say first.
I think we have put on the table a lot of questions. I would like to to give the floor to the audience, to the public, because I don't want to monopolize. I don't want us to monopolize the talk. We have very seasoned diplomats. We have also very seasoned ministers and civil servants who have, at least known the diplomacy from very close. And we have students and professors in the room also. So I would like to turn to you. Please raise your hand if you have a question. Identify yourself quickly and try to put a question and not a too long comment. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lucas Allam. I wanted to ask about creating national consensus, because right now...
To whom is your question?
To Mr. Nassif Hitti. I wanted to ask about, you talk about creating a national consensus, and one of the most immediate difficulties I see in that is that there are some communities in certain parts of Lebanon that are facing significantly greater aggression and violence from our neighbors to the south than others. And so in a situation where the Lebanese state hasn't been proactive in responding to that, or has struggled to be proactive in responding to that, how do you bring those people into a national consensus?
Yes, I think it's an uphill struggle, to be honest. It's not very easy, but we are progressing along this line because it's a needed matter. It's a needed matter. National consensus doesn't mean is minimal agreement on basic matters, as you know. Doesn't mean that you have to see eye to eye ideologically or politically or strategically. What protects our nation state? And that it could be done in terms of setting the priorities of our policies, setting how to address issues that are sources of opportunities for us, because we're expert in missing opportunities. My good friend knows better. And also in containing and reducing the effect of some negative waves in the region. So it could be done, and we could move forward on that matter. It's not impossible to do it, especially that your history is a positive history on that matter, and the soft power that you have, the quality of education, the networks you have. Lebanon has a strong network everywhere, not only among Lebanese. People would listen to you. So basically, this could be put into action.
Bakr Mohammed, National Bloc. Piggybacking off the previous question, instead of national consensus, I think our government current formation or system is what sort of obstructs us from reaching a unified foreign policy. With our current system, where we need all representation and not having a sort of winning coalition that forms the foreign policy, for example, such as in the US or in Australia, where the winning party forms the foreign policy, all the ministers are from within that party, how do you then form this unified foreign policy if you have to at the same time represent all the different tawa'if, which also leads to representing all the different ahzab, which are not going to agree to a unified foreign policy? Thank you.
Yeah. At the risk of repeating myself, diversity is a source of richness. Doesn't mean that you have to agree on everything. But no party will have the right to decide alone. No political party, no political actor has the right to decide alone on this side or that side where to take the policy of the country. So that's what we are suggesting. We have to have this minimal understanding on what's common. Ideologically, you could be free to think like you want to think, but within the national framework when it comes to operationalize your decisions. Otherwise, we will not have any more, we will not be able anymore to consolidate, I say to consolidate, not to have, a nation state. That's an important matter to do, and it was done in many times in history. You could have plenty of examples today against, but you could have plenty of examples when it was working. On many instances. At the end of the day, it's important for everybody. I mentioned a simple example in history during the, I'm not saying exclusively, the Shahab time. How to develop a foreign policy at the height of the Arab Cold War. We all studied, we all have read Malcolm Kerr's famous book, The Arab Cold War, and that was a very important matter to develop. So it could be done. It's not that it can't be done. It's not easy, but it could be done. But it's at the end of the day, it's in the interest of everybody to have that kind of balanced and active policy that provides you with protection.
Before giving you the floor, Dr. Ziadeh, I would like to have maybe Ambassador Ziadeh's comments also on that point, or the 2 points that were raised.
No, actually, it's. I started by national interest, and the national interest for me in a complex society, as I already mentioned, is reflected in a ministerial declaration. Now, it's a matter of choice. And if I may share with you a personal discussion that we had with Minister Hitti, with my due respect to him, it's a matter of decision to choose between security or stability, between safety or security, between justice and security. All these issues lead us to make difficult choices, but pragmatic one. The pragmatism in us will state, based on our history, is we need to be the country that is destined to be. Now, we are a complex society, and we're not the only one in this situation. We know the challenges, but as long as we manage to reach a common consensus to be together and to be the country of message to the international community, this is very important, at least for us and seen from a diplomatic lens. Thank you.
Dr. Saad Shami.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joe, for organizing this interesting conference or panel. I have a very quick question for Minister Hitti. When we talk about mediation, and you gave the example of Oman and Qatar now, I believe that in order to have a good mediation and good mediator, you have to have some national, interest or unity in the position you take. And this, unfortunately, does not exist in Lebanon for the time being. This is the simple one. The other question or issue I have is that, as Joe mentioned at the beginning, we are very, very polarized society nowadays. We don't see eye to eye on many things, not only on politics, but also on economics, on social, on administrative matters, and so on and so forth. Is there a way of finding common denominators for this country to function as a normal country, in the sense that, if I want to summarize it, I would say we don't see eye to eye on two main issues: the way we are governed as a country, whether it is central government, decentralization, federalism, or even division, some separation, as some people argue for. And the other one on foreign policy. We don't have, as you said, Mr. Hitti, you said you talk about foreign policies, not one policy. So can we find really a common, I know that Ambassador Ziadeh talked about the ministerial declaration. We have seen so many ministerial declarations, they were not respected. And these are papers that you issue at the beginning, and then everybody will forget about it. But can you imagine that we come to a situation where we have one economic foreign policy, and if we can't, this is the issue, if we can't, how is this related to the way we are governed? I mean, where do we go from there?
Thank you. This is what I meant at the beginning. I fully agree. I described what we need to be able to become an actor and not remain a subject. I always describe Lebanon as being a simple mailbox for different actors, states and non-states, to exchange messages via Lebanon. It was always a mailbox. It was never an actor, a serious actor. I'm talking about sovereign decisions. Because of this vertical, split in Lebanon. I joke in the past with some French friends of ours when they say the Christian right and the Muslim left in Lebanon. You read a bit of Marxism, Leninism, left bank theories. But the Fallah coming from Akkar was fighting on an identity-based issue. Our wars were identity. We were split over identity-based, conflictual, exclusive identity-based matter. We are out of it to a certain extent today. And I raised the conditions. In order to be able to play such a role, you have at least to have credibility at home to develop. It's not changing one's ideological perspective, but changing one's political perspective. I'm free to believe in whatever I want to believe, in a supranational ideology, exclusive. But in terms of citizen, we have to think about something, not rocking the boat, because at the end of the day, we'll all be losing. It's not an easy task, but it could be run, especially that the lessons we've seen, and that sometimes lessons in the past, we were able to do like that. So what I suggest, it's an uphill struggle, but we have no way but to go like that. If we remain at the receiving end, it's always a lose-lose situation. And we can talk hours about describing a lose-lose situation. But at the end of it, everybody is a loser. Nobody is a winner. It's a misperception to think that somebody's a winner. It's not easy to repeat myself, but this is the only way that we can take to get out. And there are many lessons that are pushing us, not perhaps fast enough, into that direction.
Ali, Dr. Ali.
Hello. This question is Ali Annan. This question is for the three of you, and it's about active neutrality, but it has three segments, quick questions about each. Number one, can you have active neutrality?
Positive, I didn't say active, just in case. It's called positive neutrality,
You're right.
Active policy, two different things.
You're right, positive neutrality. Can you have positive neutrality with an enemy state? Number one, Israel is, according to our constitution, an enemy state. Can you have positive neutrality with someone like that? Number one.
With?
With Israel.
I'm sorry, perhaps you are not here in the room, or you didn't hear me, I didn't speak high. Israel is an enemy.
Yeah.
Positive neutrality is something between countries with which you have normal relations. So doesn't fit.
Thank you, very good question.
No, that's what I said before.
No, I'm not criticizing.
No.
I'm asking because now it's become very popular as a topic. Positive neutrality, active neutrality. Next week there's a couple of conferences about it. So I'm trying.
Sorry, but those, not to interrupt you, but those who talk about positive neutrality, I'm not defending those who don't mean with enemies. Doesn't apply to countries with which you don't have relations. It applies to countries with which you have normal relations.
Wonderful.
Only.
Thank you.
Have normal relations,
yeah.
And normal relations could be up and down. But definitely, I'm sorry again to interrupt you, it doesn't apply by definition.
Please interrupt me. I'm seeking knowledge from you. So you've given a very good answer. Thank you. Part two, where you saw just recently Sheikh Naim Qasim, the outreach to Saudi Arabia. Is this a good step towards that kind, what you're calling for, between our countries? And number three, it's been mentioned repeatedly the role of Qatar, the role of Oman, and the X role or the potential role for Lebanon. No one is more of a poster child for this role than Qatar, and it didn't defend it against Israel. So is that really a very alluring thing we're reaching? Because the issue of Israel is the most divisive, the most polarizing and existential threat we have now. So if we want to reach to be a Qatar, for example, will it help us? Will it protect us?
No.
In front of such a power-crazed state?
Just me answer some of the questions first, starting by the last one. When we say playing, again, a mediation role, doesn't mean going to speak to Israel. It's not something that you take as such. You mediate in that situation in positive neutrality between countries with which you have relations, not with which you don't have relations and you're in a state of war. The state of war. I'm not talking about Qatar, I'm talking about Lebanon, but I've given Qatar as an example in many instances. It's not take it or leave it. In many instances, the Iranians come to Oman and come to Qatar to mediate. I mean, let's not, with all the respect to all countries, making ideological statements is one thing and discussing not very much in the dark is something else. We all know about it. I'm in the presence of distinguished diplomats. We know that. And we work in that. I'm opening my hand. We work in that. So that's an important matter. Countries. There is one positive element that happened in the region that we could build on. We have seen a normalization process that occurred between Iran and many Arab countries, starting with the role played by our Chinese friends. We have seen a normalization between Turkey and most Arab countries. It happened at the moment when Turkey and Iran stopped using the ideological factor directly to say, I speak over your head. That's what I started my talk about. If you want to keep speaking over the heads of states, grant them and withdraw them legitimacy, it's not serious because they could do the same. Nobody has an absolute right about legitimacy. We talk in the logic of states. This is why I spoke about a Westphalian normal order. We might disagree, but we do business. Look at China and the United States. Look at China, at Russia and Europe. Mobilization is for your own sake. So there is a positive change in the region. And last but not least, in 2014, I signed with a Iranian colleague, university professor. We're in Madrid, attending a conference in Madrid, a paper, just a little paper called Why Not Having a Conference on Security and Cooperation in the Middle East, meaning Arab countries plus Iran and Turkey, excluding Israel. Conference on Security and Cooperation doesn't mean unity. It means we sit like the Conference on Security and Cooperation, like it started with the Helsinki process. We sliced issues, we adopt what you call the slicing issues. We agree on something, we disagree on others, and we don't allow what we disagree on to force itself on what we agree on. Last but not least, it's between countries that have normal relations. And when I say normal relations, that could be friendly or unfriendly, not countries with which you have no relations at all because you're technically in a state of war and legally and morally in a state of war with them.
Is there another question in the room? I've tried, okay, please. Because I've tried to nudge the seasoned diplomats who are here to ask a question, but apparently they are instructed not to say anything. So,
c'est une déformation. They have a deformation. They don't ask questions.
Which is contrary to public diplomacy rules, but it's okay. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Charles. I have a question about the political system and how these things you mentioned in the policy brief, which are positive neutrality and proactive diplomacy, apply to it. So there's a lot of studies on consociational democracy that talk about how this system does not properly work without regional stability and internal stability, some sort of alignment on the external and internal. My question is, to what extent do you think positive neutrality and proactive diplomacy apply when we don't have regional stability, which is the case most of the time in this region? Does it still apply throughout the system?
Ambassador Ziadeh, would you take that one, please?
Thank you. Actually, what is neutrality and mediation that Minister Hitti presented and Dr. Bahout, you touched upon? It's trying to find ways and means to preserve, first, your territorial integrity and your national interest. So neutrality should be adopted and based on buy-ins by multiple stakeholders inside the country. And once it is consolidated, this neutrality will be offered to a turbulent region as a stabilizing factor. And here comes the mediator dimension. Because if a complex society who overcome a very turbulent history from civil wars to the impact and successive Israeli wars on Lebanon, the recent one being last September, it is very important to strengthen our ownership of this neutrality. And while doing so, we need to sharpen our tools to project that what worked in Lebanon could work abroad. And going back to the examples of mediators, Oman and Qatar, yes, it was only Qatar's developed the mediation as a doctrine during their tenure in the Security Council. So they mediated, they facilitated, and they have invested capital, political, diplomatic, and financial capital to ensure their mediations. So we have the tools. We have the human resources, we have the expertise, we have the knowledge, and that's how we can build on the mediation. If it's not neutral or preserving the national sovereignty and stability in a turbulent region, what would be the alternative? And I will stop here.
Minister Hitti.
Just to add a point to what the ambassador has said also, going back to what we were talking, there is a second track. We spoke, I mentioned rapidly the second track, or track 1.5 diplomacy, which could act as a way of exploring the possibilities without any commitment. Even 1.5, you take off your official hat, you speak as an intellectual, as a writer, doesn't commit anybody, but it facilitates matter. So 1.5 or track 2 diplomacy is extremely important. Plus, again, public diplomacy. Because public diplomacy, you can test the ground. You could feel the heat of the kitchen, as we say. And nobody would leave the kitchen, this is lesson 1 in negotiation, unless everybody feels the heat of the kitchen, that they have interest to work out their way out. So it's between a win-win situation and the lose-lose situation. So it's all creative in that sense.
Yes, hello, thank you. Dr. Adams from Hitti.
Can you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, Dr. Adams from Hitti University. I have a question to the neutrality aspect. You're saying positive neutrality, so you do not want the legal neutrality. The question is why. I'm guessing because it is in the moment not realistic, because you're surrounded by states that would not commit to neutrality of Lebanon. So therefore, you cannot arrange a legal neutrality. But if you talk only as a policy about positive neutrality, meaning dealing with friendly states, how does it secure your borders? How does it secure your sovereignty? I think as a small state and not very well equipped military-wise, I think your only options is to align yourself with a stronger power. With a stronger power. So that is another policy that is an option for you. So the question from me is why not considering aligning yourself with, for example, the US, like Jordan does. and it lives since many years in peace and prosperity. And when you reach then in the whole Middle East a situation where the states would respect neutrality, then you can move to to real neutrality in Lebanon, which I would, as a European, of course, prefer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. There is nothing in common, to be blunt, first, between positive neutrality and what you call legal neutrality. Legal neutrality means you're out of anything. You're at distance of everybody. Positive neutrality is I don't take side in an ideological conflict or policy conflict between two countries with which I have relations. And that relations could develop or could go back. Two different things. Bluntly, as I mentioned, Lebanon is a founding member of the Arab League. Jordan doesn't have legal neutrality, as you know. No. We cannot, that's what I meant. No, that's a different, again, perhaps I'm not explaining myself well. This is legal neutrality. We're not talking about legal neutrality. We're political neutrality, even if others don't accept it, at least it provides you, if somebody is telling you, come and join me against the other, so you become part of a fight. It's better to be in the middle and not join, and to be necessary and active for everybody. That's another story, securing your borders. You secure your borders whether you're fighting or active neutrality. But it's not the US that's going to guarantee your securing of the borders. I'm being very blunt about it. And 5 hours ago, I could give you examples of that. I mean, this is not the kind of what is securing your borders. It's not that kind of neutrality being in the arm. Okay.
Yeah. Musa, PPIE student. So when you talk about foreign policy, Professor Yeghia talked about that states, foreign policy has to do with survival. And the minister, you mentioned that the current state of the region is basically more transnational policies rather than international, as in between states. So this poses the issue of security. When you talk about Switzerland as a country that adopts a neutral state, or even Qatar and Oman. Qatar and Oman have the US security as in, yeah. And Switzerland actually had a huge deposit of gold from all the countries in Europe, and they have military conscription always. They have a very advanced military. So there's the issue of security. So in terms of Lebanon, US envoy today, Tom Barak, always mentioned that Lebanon has no strength, that he says that Lebanon's existence as such is being disputed, etc., etc. So the question becomes, what do you think is the strength for Lebanon? How can we actually negotiate in a way that ensures our security in terms of military and in terms of... Yeah.
We are not comparing Switzerland, which is legal neutrality, to the other countries which do neutrality a la carte, meaning in terms of crisis. I stay neutral in terms of crisis and speak to everybody. Two different concepts that have nothing in common. To start with the definition. This is not my, of course I adopt this definition, but this is the definition. Positive neutrality is not taking side, it's not like that. You remain in the middle, not entirely outside the equation, and you cannot and you will not do legal neutrality because we're an Arab country, it doesn't mean that you have to liberate Palestine. Some is going to jump from the other side and tell me about that. But I cannot do that for numerous reasons. Doesn't have a core at home for numerous reasons. What I'm suggesting, this could give you more strength at home if you're able to develop a minimal consensus of not pushing yourself in the arms of somebody to be used as a card against the other when they are negotiating. I could give you plenty of examples. We were criticized for talking with some Arab countries who have signed the Abraham's Accord, when those who criticized us were meeting in the Abraham Accords with the countries, with the Americans. I could give you the dates. It's okay, this is politics. Otherwise, we'll be on the unemployment diplomats if there is no such thing.
Yeah, I agree. But
so basically, it's not what we tell to the children, I'm sorry, before they go to bed. We have to be cynically realistic about that matter.
Yeah, if I may add one question.
But the difference is there is nothing in common between what you call legal neutrality and political or positive neutrality.
Agreed, but my point was if you think of it this way, then security becomes an issue, and then foreign policy becomes more aggressive. But that's another issue.
Security is always an issue. Your security.
Yeah, it becomes aggressive, but not neutral. The second question is, with Qatar and Oman as the regional in the region playing the role of mediators, don't you think that they wouldn't even let us play the role of mediators?
Nobody could say, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I won't let you. If you're active, you become a necessity. And let me remind you of something. مش متعصب as a Lebanese. I mean, we were the center of the Arab world for so many years. We had a continuous dialogue in this university, which was a little United Nations. I was here for 5 years. We would have continuous dialogue. That's your soft power. If you can translate that societal soft power into institutional soft power, it's in the interest of everybody, even with those who don't agree with each other ideologically or politically at home.
Okay. Anyway, one main takeaway of this exchange is probably that we'll have to organize a conference or an event on the issue of neutrality itself. I think it needs some explanation.
Which neutrality? Yes.
So exactly. So
we are talking about two
okay, we got it. This is why we'll do this. We'll do this event about positive, legal, etc., active neutrality. A last question, since it's maybe my privilege, and I would like to put it to you, Caroline. If you know a little bit the new generation of diplomats who are today volunteering, if they are, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Given what we are saying about the necessity to revise our diplomatic apparatus, and given what you know about this new generation, do you perceive or do you foresee today a new cohort of people, of young people, wanting and willing to enter the fray of diplomacy in Lebanon and serve this country abroad?
Thank you. This is very pertinent. And if I may, I don't think if you're referring to the colleagues in the room that I haven't seen, I don't think we received instructions, none of us received instructions not to speak. We are here to participate and to share with all of you our instructions. If you're referring to other diplomats...
sorry, I was talking about the foreign diplomats who honor us with the presence.
Sorry.
No, my question was about, I mean, if we take the recommendations that we have put in this paper, okay, we are saying we need to recraft a new diplomatic apparatus for Lebanon in order to cope and to be up to the challenges of a new foreign policy, okay? Meaning more public diplomacy, training to mediation, maybe economic issues, human security like climate, etc., okay? So we need a new skill set, and we need a new human resource body. You as I would say a young diplomat, and knowing the Lebanese diplomacy, and knowing probably the new generation in Lebanon, do you see that people today would be encouraged? What's your assessment? Are you seeing that people are encouraged today to join the diplomatic apparatus, or we need to make an effort in order to attract them to that career? Because it's a very important and interesting career.
Yes. No, thank you. I understood your question, and thank you for repeating it. Indeed, I know many of the new colleagues who joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And yes, they are interested. And yes, they are fully aware, like us as the senior diplomats, that we have new challenges and there is a need to adapt to new realities, as you mentioned, from human security to climate change. I think the attractiveness is still there. The interest is still there. Can we do more? For sure, there's always room for improvement. And I think we are going to open very soon a call for new diplomats. So I encourage all the people who are eligible to join, because diplomacy is a core. It's a continuum of consolidated experience and institutional memory. And I trust you have in the room many of my predecessors who contributed to the diplomatic corps, who played an important role in developing the role of Lebanon and its priorities abroad. So we need to build on their knowledge. We need to continue on our knowledge, and we need to continue working in close partnerships with you, like today, with the academia and other universities, with media people, with private sectors. It's not a unique, and going back to public diplomacy, this is public diplomacy in the making, and there's always attractiveness to be a diplomat and to serve Lebanon. Thank you.
Thank you for these very encouraging and hopeful words. Thank you very much, Ambassador Ziadeh, for having joined us.
Thank you.
Appreciate the effort, and we hope to have you another time also with us. Thank you very much, Minister Hitti, for your input for this paper, for your time today. And we know that we continue to count on you for more reflection on our foreign policy and other issues pertaining to foreign policy in general. Thank you all for having been here, and please thank me and join our distinguished guests. Thanks, and have a good evening.
Last note.
Excuse me. Sorry, forgot to add a last note. We have a small drink and cocktail here at the room close nearby. If you want to join us, we would like you to join us. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Record.